I do think that Atom does have a unique value proposition in the crypto ecosystem as a whole. And what that is I would say it is probably the most decentralized governance token in all of crypto.
Welcome in, everybody, into another matchup in Coinage's Crypto Project of the Year. Coming to you live from our Brooklyn studios, and of course, another matchup from Coinage, the only community-owned Web3 media outlet steered by our NFT holders and backed by the co-founder of Netflix. Today's presentation being brought to you by our friends at Alchemy, the go-to Web3 infrastructure provider that offers the most powerful and reliable suite of APIs, SDKs, and other tooling, all designed with developers in mind. And today will be a discussion also with developers in mind, because we're talking to two of the hottest crypto projects to profile in 2023, as according to our own community here. Excited to have both Filecoin and Cosmos represented with our guests on the show today. Osmosis co-founder Sunny Aggarwal joining us once again on Coinage, as well as today Protocol Labs ecosystem lead Colin Evran here with us as well. And excited to have this conversation to, again, spotlight the technology, the communities, and everything that's going on with these two projects. Sunny, we just had you on like a couple weeks ago, man, so maybe I'll defer to Colin to kick us off, just to get a little lowdown on what Filecoin's all about, and then we'll discuss a little bit more of what you guys got planned to continue what you guys did this year into next. But Colin, thanks so much for coming on, man. Filecoin is one of those projects that I'm always amped to hear people's reactions to, because it's kind of maybe easier to wrap your head around. So for starters, maybe we just let them know what Filecoin's all about.
Sure, and thanks for having me on, Zach. I really appreciate the opportunity. So Filecoin's mission is to create a decentralized, efficient, and robust foundation for humanity's information. But essentially what Filecoin does is enable open services for data. We launched in 2020 with kind of the core decentralized storage network. That's where users can store data across thousands of enterprise-grade global data centers as an alternative to centralized services like AWS or Google Cloud. By the way, those top three centralized cloud providers have 65 to 70% of the world's data stored on them, and becoming more consolidated. So we wanted a more open ecosystem where folks could choose the providers where they want to store their data. And that part of it's going really well. There's about 2 million terabytes of client data stored on Filecoin. That's the equivalent of 500 million 1080p movies. That's up 19x in the last 18 months, up 4x year to date. But 2023 was a year where we started launching other open services beyond the core decentralized storage protocol. The Filecoin virtual machine launched in March, and that enabled smart contracts and programmable data on Filecoin. And that led to the birth of smart contract applications and DeFi markets, which have been on an absolute tear. I think today, just a few months later, there's about 165 million in TVL on Filecoin on DeFi, and that's growing 40 to 50% per month, with applications like Seller and Axelar and Sushi deployed, Uniswap coming soon. And other services like compute over data services and retrieval markets, think of like decentralized CDNs, are starting in testnet in Q4 here and launching as L2 networks on Filecoin in 2024, Q1 and Q2. So that really enables large-scale applications to run on Filecoin and enables Filecoin to start to take advantage of broader trends like AI or heavy asset distribution or things like video like AR or VR. Mm-hmm. So kind of all in all, 2023 marked a year where the community transitioned from like being a storage network to becoming more fundamental Web3 infrastructure.
Yeah, it's been interesting to watch. And of course, other projects we've been highlighting on this little series as well, squarely focused on the idea of decentralized cloud compute, which I think we might get into a little bit later on, different than storage, but also pretty interesting. And Sunny, on the Cosmos side, I mean, it's a project that you and I were discussing just a little bit ago. It was one that kind of led the way in the old bull markets of yesteryears. And kind of one of those ones that is important in connecting different blockchains. And obviously Osmos is kind of being a DeFi leader in the Cosmos ecosystem. Why don't you just kind of, again, re-hit the points in terms of why Cosmos is so important?
Yeah, sure. So Cosmos takes a pretty different view on how blockchains, like ecosystems, could work in general. So most blockchains are usually built around this idea of like, hey, we're building an L1 that like builds as many applications on top of each other, and there's like one token at the center of this whole thing. Cosmos takes a different approach, right? Cosmos says, no matter what, there's never going to be a single system that wins. So let's build a framework that allows many competing systems, that many different tokens, many different, and allows for specialization, right? Just like there's not one global empire in the world. We live in a world of nation states, but we still, different political systems, but we all still have some notion of a larger shared economic layer. And Cosmos tries to achieve the same thing with blockchains. We build the tooling to make it easy for people to build their own custom blockchains built for their own custom applications, of which Filecoin is actually a really good example, right? Filecoin is actually an app chain at the end of the day, right? It is a focus on like providing decentralized storage. And so, we kind of just saw that more and more things are going to need to be app chains, and so we built the toolkit to make it. Unfortunately, Filecoin did not use the Cosmos SDK, but a lot of projects building app chains actually choose to use the Cosmos SDK. So,
Yeah.
Celestia, which is like everyone hyped about these days, that's built using the Cosmos SDK. Wormhole has built their chain using SDK. Um, you know, like Thorchain is built using the Cosmos SDK. Like, that's one of the other Coinage, highlighted projects for the
Yeah.
year. So a lot of people, like, it's probably the best stack to do this. And then on top of that, we built a open bridging protocol called IBC. Unlike other, once again, same as with everything in Cosmos, we aim for credible neutrality at the core. So unlike all the other bridges, which usually have a token and like some, IBC is completely neutral. There's no token. There's no rent seeking at all. And that's why IBC is the biggest bridge protocol in all of crypto. So, I just tweeted this morning actually that IBC did more volume than like Layer Zero, Wormhole, Synapse, Across, and Hop like combined.
Yeah.
So uh, credible neutrality leads to people like higher adoption.
Yeah, it's been interesting to watch. And again, I think, having differentiated options is always important. And you're right to point out Thorchain being one of those Cosmos SDK projects that has exploded in terms of volume in their kind of decentralized exchange trading, as well as Akash being a Cosmos project that we also highlighted, another one. But DYDX, also another one that's now kind of moving into the Cosmos ecosystem. I suppose that's kind of what we're going to get into here today, which is where our listeners come in to kind of vote on who should be crowned Crypto Project of the Year. Of course, it's a celebration of all these projects, which you can go to coinage.media to weigh in on this. And I think that, Colin, when we think about the size of all of this, right, when you use these blockchains now in trying to make it a seamless experience for everyone who comes to these solutions, I mean, what is the most important thing to get right that you think you're getting right at Filecoin in, I guess, onboarding non-crypto natives?
Still with me? Great.
Yep.
Sorry, froze up for a sec. So for onboarding, we have to hit scale if we're going to really become the onboarding and data storage network of the future, not only in Web3, which, we tend to, store most of Web3 assets, but also in Web2, like onboard every single user on Earth onto storing their data onto a decentralized storage network. So 2023 was a year where we saw lots of strong storage growth on Filecoin. Today, there is about 2 million terabytes of client data stored across over 3,000 enterprise-grade data centers around the world across 40 countries. That's up 4x since January 23 and 19x in the last 18 months. And so we see clients, almost 2,000 clients across research, academia, nonprofit, Web3 org, starting to store their data on Filecoin. I'll list a few examples. So Seal Storage is one of our storage providers. They've onboarded Filecoin within the academic circles. CERN's Atlas project is now storing particle physics experiment data on Filecoin. The University of Utah is storing open science data, including NASA climate data visualization data sets. We have teams like DSS that have gotten Filecoin adopted by medical institutions like the Victor Chang Research Institute. They're storing kind of cellular imaging data. There's dark matter research at UC Berkeley being stored on Filecoin, Generate storing genomics data. The Starling Lab is storing Ukraine war crime evidence, and then a whole host of Web3 use cases like Solana backing up their block history on a Filecoin, OpenSea, Gala Games, etc. But the big transition moment, I think, in 2023 was going from storage providers doing a lot of the biz dev and onboarding to get individual clients onto the Filecoin network to now in Q4, we're seeing a whole new class of user and developer friendly on-ramps, basically making this process a lot easier. So I'm thinking of Banyan, Ghost Drive, Lighthouse, Web3 Storage, Web3 Mine. They're basically offering a really easy interface, and that lowers the cost of a new kind of client joining the Filecoin network and onboarding their data to Filecoin. So really, to us, it's about scale, right? How do you get the zettabytes of the world's information onto a decentralized storage option? And most of, kind of the core protocol has been developed to enable that kind of scale, both within Web 2 and Web 3.
Yeah, the scale question is one that I think is pretty exciting to dig into here, particularly for Cosmos right now, Sonny, actually. And this is one of the things we wanted to talk to you about because if you go back to what you were rocking at Cosmoverse here, it was a picture I think I saw of you in a Roman emperor kind of costume, and it brought back to life questions about governance and what it means for all these Web3 projects and kind of voting for what's best. And I think Cosmos right now is kind of squarely in that. When it comes to the proposal that was recently passed to cut inflation rates in the Cosmos ecosystem. I'm curious to get your take on kind of like what Cosmos is all about in maybe being an example to point to for governance as these decentralized projects, if they are truly to be decentralized, are run in a way that doesn't lean so hard on founders.
Yeah. I just want to really quickly before I hop into that, I just want to mention, mention a bunch of different things hosted on Filecoin. I will add that the Osmosis website is also available at osmosis.fleek.co. So you can.
Hey, there you go. There's a cross collab right there.
Oh, yeah. Anyway, so okay, sorry. So, yeah, so, decentralized governance, I actually do think that this is a huge selling point, or not selling point, thesis of Cosmos, right? Whether it's the right bet or not is TBD, right? But if I had to Cosmos Hub has one token called Atom. So I think that's one thing worth noting, right? There's a separation between what is Cosmos and there's a specific token called Atom. Atom is not the token of Cosmos, right? Like most of these Cosmos chains have nothing to do with Atom at all, right? Like Thorchain, it has Atom, it's its own independent project. Slushy is its own independent project. Osmosis is its own independent project. Obviously, we have a lot of liquidity for Atom, but it's independent project. However, my belief. So, I think Cosmos will succeed. It is succeeding tremendously already today, with or without Atom. Mm-hmm. Now, I do think that Atom does have a unique value proposition in the crypto ecosystem as a whole. And what that is I would say it is probably the most decentralized governance token in all of crypto. And, let's say, within, maybe there's some like random small cap coin that right? But okay, out of the major cap tokens, right? I would say it's the most decentralized in a number of regards. Just on one hand, it's just like the token holder. So I'll say Bitcoin and ETH definitely more decentralized. I'm not going to argue that. Like Bitcoin and ETH, very, very decentralized, but they are not governance tokens. Bitcoin and ETH have no governance rights over the protocol. Atom, meanwhile, Atom stakers have direct say via governance in the future of the protocol. And by nature of the history of Atom, it is actually very decentralized. In the Atom ICO, they gave away like 80% of the token in the ICO distribution, which is very different than most projects, right? Most projects are usually like, oh, like, oh, here's 20% for the team, 20% for the foundation, like 20% for the, pre-sale investors. And it's like, okay, the wider community only ends up getting like, 10 to 20% of the token distribution. And you know, you look at like something like Celestia, right? Like, great project, very excited for it, but like, yeah, the token distribution is extremely centralized in a way that will never compete with, like, I think, the decentralization that you see in Atom today.
Hmm.
Um, and so we on the token distribution, but also the culture of Atom, right? Where, because in Ethereum, right, the foundation basically sets the rules of like, oh, this is what we want to happen, and like, I don't think there's really ever been a case where like what the Ethereum Foundation wanted is not what happened in Ethereum. In Cosmos, we had this weird situation where the original dev team kind of accidentally blew up because the original founder went a little bit crazy. I think he'll even admit that himself. Um, and but what that did was it kind of set it that original dev team kind of split off, splintered. But interestingly, everyone kept working in the Cosmos ecosystem, and now everyone has like slightly differing views on like what direction to take Atom. And so, without having one foundation at the center to like be like, this is what we're doing, it
Yeah.
actually now goes to governance to decide. And so you actually have this like, we've had multiple very contentious governance proposals in Atom governance, where, and the most recent one, as you mentioned, is this halvening proposal, where, Atom inflation was relatively high compared to most, like, high cap assets. Like ETH inflation, I think, is around like 4% a year or something like that. Or I know the staking APR is around 4 or 5% a year.
Yeah.
Atom inflation is close to 15%, and that's like very high. It's triple. And so there was a proposal like, hey, let's cut this in half. This will make Atom more usable in DeFi, because you don't have to like compete with the staking rate
Yeah, and
as much.
I think that that's the interesting piece too, though. Like you talk about all that being pros for Cosmos in this as we're looking at it, and being more and more decentralized, and also the tokenomics of it all too, in terms of inflation rates and things like that. And Colin, on the
Yep.
other side too, I think when we talk about tokenomics for Filecoin, I think that that's also one of the questions. And there are no really like there's no grading metrics for crypto project of the year, by the way. So I do like these conversations because it's like what really matters for projects in Web3 is an open question. And I think, do you want to lean heavy into decentralization and governance, or do you want to lean heavily into pure tokenization and number go up kind of mentalities here? But Colin, I mean, how do people look at kind of what Filecoin's doing on that side? Because obviously we've talked about maybe the product and solution to the problem in decentralizing storage is great, but what is the actual tokenomics, and how does the technology kind of work in tying all of it together?
Yeah, totally. So the tokenomics are flexible to enable as much data stored on the Filecoin network as possible. So if Filecoin onboards more storage capacity, there's a higher rate of emission to reward those storage providers than if it's in more of a bear market and there's less storage being onboarded. The inflation rate goes down quite substantially. Also, for the storage providers participating in the network, they're to the extent that they store verified data on Filecoin, they get rewarded much, much more, to the tune of 10x, versus if they're just storing capacity or storing ones and zeros. So we try to align, I think the community's tried to align the tokenomics to the specific use case for Filecoin. What's been a transformative moment, I think, for Filecoin this year is the launch of the Filecoin virtual machine enabled a whole bunch of DeFi activity that was not possible before. So with the launch of smart contracts, token holders can now lend their Filecoin to storage providers, so they can post it as collateral and grow their businesses and onboard more data, and then return some of that yield to token holders. And so that has really exploded since March. Today, the TVL of the DeFi economy on Filecoin is over 165 million. It's been growing 40 to 50% monthly over the last 6 months. And we're starting to deploy more applications like Seller, Axelar, Sushi, Uniswap just passed a vote to support Filecoin, and so they're coming in the next month or so. And so this has kind of fundamentally changed the engagement of the token holders within the Filecoin community in participating and onboarding more and more real clients and real storage to the protocol.
Yeah, and on that point, I guess, Sonny, you were just kind of talking about that. We talked about governance, but also kind of the costs in using all these things and kind of why DYDX, I think, landed on Cosmos in some of the tech that makes it cheaper. I think the founder of DYDX said, look, we can't build something like this on Ethereum. I mean, how is kind of the usability out of the box something that you would say to other people and saying, why is Cosmos different than other crypto projects?
Yeah. So part of the goal here is like making it, the reason we wanted to build a stack like the Cosmos SDK was to give people the customizability that you need in order to build custom app chains. Now, I will admit, maybe 80% of 80 to 90% of applications probably don't need a custom app chain, right? Maybe they could have just gotten away with being a smart contract on Ethereum or on L2 or something. But that 10 to 20%, which I think is actually the most valuable 10 to 20%, are the things that need to be fully vertically integrated. So I often like to use Apple as like the example of a product company that's extremely has like perfected vertical integration, right? Part of the reason Apple's products are so good is that they control the app. So they build a lot of the core apps. They build the OS, they build the phone, and they build the like chips as well now, right? With M1 chips. And by having that vertical control, they can build these like products that you couldn't on if they were using other people's hardware, for example, or depending on someone else for their software. So, DYDX saw this as well. They're like, okay, to build the product that we have in our mind, like we want to run order books in the mempool. So we need to they basically like looked at all the stacks and like, okay, no, this is the stack that gives us the maximum control over the whole stack to go execute how we want. Thorchain saw the same thing. Celestia saw the same thing, right? Like the stack is just like what enables that level of customizability.
Yeah, and I think, when we talk about where these projects have come, that's the other big piece of all of this when we're trying to hone in on, all right, we've got 16 projects represented in this. They're all, in their own right, nominees in being the Crypto Project of the Year. And then when we have you guys on the show, we get a little bit more personal in the way of kind of how the year's gone behind the scenes, because obviously everyone sees what's being built in public. But in private, I mean, it's a lot of work to get to kind of this stage. Colin, I'm not sure if there's anything when you look back on the year that you would kind of call out as, super huge accomplishments for the team outside of what we talked on the tech side, but just in terms of pulling the curtain back a little bit when you're trying to build as a team something that is leaning into the idea of being decentralized. If there's something that stands out to you in 2023 leading Filecoin.
Yeah, I would say like the three big innovations are starting to become, completely separate projects, separate than kind of like Protocol Labs or the Filecoin Foundation. So the FVM kind of kicked off a whole new series of applications. There are like 11 to 15 new DeFi protocols and hundreds of other applications that are building programmable storage on the FVM. So that's kind of celebrating the broader ecosystem that's participating. There's a compute over data working group that has dozens of teams building compute services as L2s on top of Filecoin. Many of those will launch in mainnet in the Q1 2024. And you have like teams like IONET that have been partnering with Filecoin storage providers to drive GPU utilization of Filecoin SPs, which means like AI jobs can start coming to Filecoin, both to actually, run the compute for those AIs, but also to start to store the data from those on the hard drives that are basically the cheapest place to store right next to them on the same SPs. And then finally, there's like a whole host of independent teams that are starting to spin off around retrieval networks and decentralized CDNs. Think like Saturn and Titan and Station. Those have thousands of nodes all over the world that are starting to provide decentralized CDN services, more like the caching layer. And so that really enables a whole host of use cases where heavy assets can be distributed much more quickly and much more locally. Think like AR/VR have huge kind of heavy asset distributions that some of these networks can really take on. And so some of that's in testnet, and they're kind of moving towards mainnet in Q1 2024. So I would say from the team perspective, it's celebrating the community's accomplishments of bringing some of those three major innovations to market. The Filecoin virtual machine, which enables smart contracts, compute over data, which enables things like AI, and retrieval networks, which enables decentralized CDNs.
Yeah, and I guess, Sonny, last time you were on, we were talking about the idea of what really gets people excited. You know, the bear market was one thing. I think we're all fair to say, you know, 2023 is very different than I think the hopes for 2024, and where, you know, not just your projects go, but the entire crypto space goes. Sonny, last time you were giving a shout out to Ordinals, which has really caught fire in terms of bringing some of the creativity back to Bitcoin. In terms of kind of what Cosmos has planned for next year, and really leaning into what you guys do well and what Osmosis does well, I mean, what are you seeing as maybe the big things to look out for in 2024 on your side?
Yeah. Honestly, I would probably continue my line of thought. I'm continuously more and more bullish on Bitcoin. I have always been, and just today, Babylon just announced their raise. That they're a project that I'm an advisor for, but they are, you know, building Bitcoin staking. So you can stake Bitcoin to help secure Cosmos chain. So similar to Eigenlayer, if people are familiar on Ethereum, they're building Eigenlayer, but with Bitcoin, which is the largest capital asset in all of crypto. So that should be like really that's one thing I'm like really really excited for. But and just generally, you know, where I'm gonna make a claim.
Oh, here we go. Here we go.
That by the end of 2024, Osmosis will be the biggest DEX for Bitcoin. And so
why do you think that is?
So today, like I would say, the Thorchain, which is like a Cosmos chain, is actually I think the number one DEX for Bitcoin. It's like doing I think 2% of global Bitcoin volumes, which is like pretty impressive, right? Like compared to centralized exchanges. I think that with Osmosis, we're working on our own native Bitcoin integrations, and sorry, that's a bubble. We're working on our own native Bitcoin integrations, and combined with our concentrated liquidity system, I think we're going to be able to provide like the best UX for how to trade between like native Bitcoin and ETH and Tether and anything that Osmosis is connected to, which by the way actually includes Filecoin. We work our closest bridge partner today is a team called Axelar. And so via Axelar, we're actually connected already to Filecoin. So, you know, if you want to swap from native Bitcoin to Filecoin, but without touching a centralized exchange, like Osmosis will be like the place to do that.
Yeah. No, I think
that's
awesome,
a lot of it. Sonny.
Yeah, go for it, Colin.
That's awesome, and highly encourage people to check that bridge out. That's been a recent launch and super anticipated for both our communities.
Yeah, I think that's one of the most things that's, again, as a journalistic outlet here, we're trying to look and see in terms of what things catch people's attention. And Colin, I don't know if you saw this, but there was a poll recently in terms of people saying 92% of respondents to this one YouGov poll that they'd have heard of crypto, yet only 8% said that they were very familiar with the concept of Web3. And I think that's kind of, again, you know, the distinction between, all right, we have crypto project of the year, what exactly is it all about? And this idea of people maybe understanding, you know, what the technology does if you're trying to use it that way, and kind of what the solutions are and why they're better. I mean, when you get asked at Filecoin, I mean, obviously people are familiar with the idea of using centralized providers for storage. I mean, what is it at the core in terms of how you look at, you know, maybe Web3 projects competing against themselves versus traditional Web2 players?
Yeah, the way I explain Filecoin to my mom or something like that would be it's kind of like the Airbnb of cloud storage, where instead of storing your data on a behemoth like AWS, you can now choose from thousands of different storage providers that compete to store your data for you, and in an open kind of service environment. I think the big transition moment that we're trying to enable with Filecoin is to enable major applications serving hundreds of millions of people and onboard them to a Web3 infrastructure stack. We're trying to get outside of the Web3 bubble where, kind of hardcore crypto kind of developers start using, Web3 stack to a point where you can enable massive, massive kind of Web2 scale applications onto kind of the Web3 stack. And so the three things that we're trying to do there is, enable kind of all sorts of L2 networks to build on Filecoin's L1 storage capabilities, from compute networks, think like Fluence or Lumino launching in the first half of next year, to storage and database networks like Lighthouse and Tableland, to retrieval networks like Saturn and Station and Titan. We're basically trying to extend the stack where, think of like a YouTube or a TikTok can migrate to the Web3 stack with the scale of Filecoin storage capabilities, but all the services like compute and retrieval and programmability that you need to operate natively in a Web3 world. And so I think if you can enable kind of like a massive consumer application that we use every day, think of like, TikTok or YouTube or Instagram onto the Web3 stack, that changes the whole narrative on how we're crossing the chasm and enabling Web3 infrastructure to permeate through billions of people.
I think it's this out of all the matchups, by the way, when we're highlighting the 16 top projects in crypto for our community to vote on, this is a tough matchup, I would say, because these projects aren't necessarily apples to apples when we're looking at what you guys are working on in Filecoin and what Cosmos is working on. And Sonny, I think it is interesting to maybe step back and even just ask the simple questions around the differences that you guys might be seeing going into year end, because I mean, look, there's a lot of excitement now brewing when you're talking about what's going on with Bitcoin. You mentioned it as a reason to keep your eyes on what you guys are doing at Osmosis. I mean, how does it feel for you as like kind of one of the major builders in the Cosmos ecosystem now that you have the excitement, not just from the people in crypto, but as Colin's mentioning, I think a lot of people who might be outside of it re-looking at what's possible. I mean, what are you seeing now?
Yeah, I mean, one of our big focuses is how do we prepare for every bull market. There's a shit ton of people who come into crypto excited to buy their first Bitcoin or Dogecoin. Usually, it's actually probably Dogecoin, right? I mean, I got into crypto with Dogecoin. A lot of people get into crypto with Dogecoin, and so um, they're looking to buy their first one, and then they go onto Coinbase or something, buy it, and then they get trapped there, right? Like I think less than 5% of the users ever actually make it off of Coinbase and like using DeFi and using crypto how it's meant to be used. And so what we needed to do was figure out, okay, why is it that centralized exchanges are just so much better at onboarding users than decentralized exchanges? And it came down to like a couple of things. Like there's different things that in play here. One is the fiat on and off ramps. That's a big one, obviously. So we have some strategies there. But the other is like the UX side of things, right? Like the UX of onboarding into a crypto wallet is just so bad. Like you have to go download a Chrome extension, you have to go save these 24 words. It's just like very jarring experience to non-crypto natives. Like I actually, I did a research, like a case study. I took one of my friends who is an engineer at Robinhood. So, he's technical, he works in fintech, and I recorded a video of him trying to onboard onto MetaMask, onto Uniswap, and it was painful. And so that's why we were like, okay, how do we fix this? And so we've been working on this, like spending a lot of time on this like concept of account abstraction, but like how do we bake in account abstraction at the chain level with the DEX and like just make the onboarding experience of onboarding onto Osmosis or any Cosmos project as easy as like signing up for a Facebook account or like a Twitter account, right? Like we want to get Web 2 onboarding to the same level as Web 2 onboarding.
Yeah, and I mean, I guess that's always the trade-off too, Colin. I don't know if you have anything to add to that because, as you guys move farther and farther along in terms of being kind of more Web3 native with what's possible on Filecoin and, again, as you talk about the technological improvements and maybe inching in that direction. I mean, is there a trade-off there or how are you looking at kind of the biggest opportunity to capitalize on?
Yeah, I kind of agree with Sunny that the onboarding experience really matters in the next few years here. And so there's a huge focus within our ecosystem of teams developing these kind of on-ramps where it makes it much, much easier to kind of store your data, run computation over it, and things like that, both across Web3 and in Web2 data sets. In kind of both worlds. So I'm thinking of on-ramps like Banyan and GhostScribe and Lighthouse and Web3 Mine that just make it really, really easy for a user to drag and drop a file or a developer to integrate an application and make it easy there. But I think the other major trend is for kind of crypto and for Web3 to participate in mega Web2 trends, things like AI or AR/VR at the infrastructure layer, so that as those kind of like industries grow multiples and multiples in the coming years, Web3 can participate at the infrastructure layer to enable some of those services. And that's honestly one of the reasons why I'm really excited about Filecoin in the next few years, is that the kind of capabilities around storage and compute, and then kind of the decentralized CDN that's emerging on top of it, they can really enable a whole bunch of infrastructure plays to enable different kinds of folks within AI or AR/VR or kind of this new Web3 movement around decentralized physical infrastructure, DePIN, to find a home and use kind of native decentralized infrastructure to solve their problems. So I think for the average consumer, we need definitely better on-ramps, just like Sunny mentioned. And then for some of the mega trends, we need a set of infrastructure on the Web3 side that can accommodate the kind of growth that they need to be successful.
Well, our vote's going to be opening up here in just a few minutes on Coinage.media, so we are coming to the close, and I think everyone has learned enough about the actual projects themselves to make a call on getting closer to crowning a crypto project of the year here at Coinage. But before we let y'all go, Sunny, as you learned last time, we always like to get big, bold predictions, and last time we had you on, you made one that has come true in the sense of the flippening did not happen in 2023. At least it's December and it hasn't happened. So that was correct. But looking ahead to 2024, you already made one about Osmosis and potentially watching what's happening on Bitcoin. But I would give you the one last chance to make a big, bold prediction for next year beyond it, because we love having you on and we love checking to see if Sunny's right. So I give you the floor again.
I will follow up with the flippening is not going to happen next year either. I promise you, every time people, as soon as people start talking about the flippening, that's when you know the bull market's over. Sell it all. That's, it's never going to happen. I will die by those words. But okay, a big bold position. I think Osmosis has the biggest DEX for Bitcoin is a big one. What else? Let's see. I think we are going to see at least one more. At least one top 10 asset by market cap will be a Cosmos SDK based project. So, we had one last year, which was Terra.
Yes, of course. Not there anymore, but it was there.
I'm pretty sure that there'll be a top 10 asset, whether it's, I don't know what it's going to be, right? But I think a top 10 asset will probably be Cosmos SDK based.
I think that's a pretty good call. I think that's a good bold call. I mean, we've been highlighting Thorchain partially because it's been rising the ranks in terms of overall total market cap as a project, and again, built on Cosmos SDK. Colin, I'd turn to you for also one of your big bold claims, and it doesn't necessarily need to be Filecoin related, but I'll let you choose whether you want it to be or not.
I'll make two. One is that Web3 will participate in the infrastructure layer of AI starting in 2024. And I think Filecoin will be one of many components that'll enable that. The other one is maybe more Filecoin related. I think Filecoin will be a top 10 DeFi network by TVL by the end of 2024. It was about 100, ranked 100 maybe like 3 or 4 months ago. It's number 25 today. And I think that because there's kind of a fundamentally different set of economic activity on Filecoin's DeFi infrastructure that's possible. Because as different businesses emerge on Filecoin, whether selling cash flows for storage services or compute services, you can start to run DeFi type models on capitalizing those cash flows, lending against them, being kind of first in line to pay down the interest or principal and things around that. And so you're actually running DeFi type infrastructure on real cash flows for businesses within the Filecoin ecosystem, which I think will open up a whole new world for DeFi to start to expand into in 2024. So top 10 by TVL by the end of next year.
Big bold claims here, man. I listen again. I think partially the reason why we have a lot of projects on that have qualified for Crypto Project of the Year is because they dream big and they execute big. Both of you guys did. I want to congratulate both of you guys again for coming on and being nominated by our community as a Crypto Project of the Year for Filecoin and for Cosmos, for Sunny, for Colin, for myself, for everybody at Coinage. Voting will be open. If you don't have a Coinage NFT, you can scoop one up and participate in crowning Crypto's Project of the Year. I'm Zach Usman. Guys, thank you again for coming on. We hope to have you back. We'll see how the vote goes. Thanks again. Congrats again. That'll do it for us. We'll see you again soon.